Under stadium lights that hummed like bees, I watched a silver ball drop and bounce once on the new turf. The handheld meter chirped and flashed a hard number I didn't want to see. The trainer glanced at me as if I had said a curse out loud. My fingers tightened around a manila envelope I had no business holding, an envelope with a staple through a page that should not have existed. On that page was a side letter no one had voted on, a sentence about a brand partner fee scribbled above a vendor signature, and a smaller, uglier line that said rebate schedule. An hour earlier, I was a retired school bookkeeper who still made brownies for bake sales and kept extra bandages in our pocket. 10 minutes from now, I would be the woman people in this town would call nosy or brave or both. My son, standing at the 50-yard line in a polo with our high school's initials pressed over his heart, rubbed the back of his neck and avoided my eyes. My daughter-in-law, perfect hair under stadium glare, smiled at her phone while the camera pointed at the brand new scoreboard behind us like it was proof our town was finally important. I told the trainer to run the test again. He did. The meter complained higher than it should. The turf was too hard. Hard fields put kids in the emergency room. I felt the envelope edge bite into my palm, and I finally understood what had been scratching at me for months. Nothing about this project felt clean. Not the invoices with matching typos. Not the donor wall with names in the wrong order. Not the whispered, "Don't worry, this is how the big schools do it," from a vendor who wouldn't meet my eye. On the other side of the track, the marching band practiced the same 8 bars in stubborn loops, brave and off-key. My town was proud. My town wanted to believe. I wanted to believe too. But I had kept records for 32 years. I knew what it meant when the numbers looked pretty at a distance and rotten up close. I looked at the envelope again and whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. I brought receipts. My name is Helen, and what happened in our town started with a promise that we deserved a field our kids could be proud of. It grew into banners, live streams, hashtags, and a parking lot full of trucks with out-of-state plates. It passed through the hands of people I loved and trusted. It bent the truth until the truth bent back. This is how I learned that nothing good stands without honest numbers under it. This is how I learned that if you want to protect your home, your school, your community, you have to be ready to open an envelope and say the uncomfortable thing out loud. I didn't plan to be the one who set everything in motion. I didn't plan to speak into a microphone. I didn't plan to embarrass my son. I didn't plan to see my daughter-in-law's eyes harden into something I didn't recognize. But plans are nothing next to what we owe each other. So I put my hand on the rail of the bleachers as if it were the rail of a ship about to turn, and I walked toward the people who could still make a choice to fix what needed fixing. The stadium had always been the same to me. Bleaching sun at 2 in the afternoon, brass smell from the tubas, goosebumps in late October. That night it felt different, like it was holding its breath. The scoreboard glowed with numbers from a test pattern. The turf shone unreasonably bright, green like a cartoon. The envelope under my arm felt heavy, and the air felt thin. We had spent a year raising money and one summer spending it. Steel posts went up and kids took pictures with cranes in the background. Then the delivery started. Pallets of rolls, barrels of glue, stacks of shock pads. The school board, God love 'em, believed the Booster Club when they said it was all coming in on budget. The Booster Club believed the vendor when he said the shortfalls would be covered by a brand partner. The vendor believed whomever wired him money and asked for a partner fee. All of them believed my daughter-in-law when she said this was the modern way of doing things. I believed the numbers. I always have.
They put me in charge of refreshments the year before because you never run out of water when the former bookkeeper is counting bottles. I kept a little notebook at my pocket with all the petty cash entries. I wrote down number plates of the rental vans when I couldn't sleep. And 3 weeks before the lights came on for this test, I had opened a box in the equipment shed to find a stack of donor plaques with the wrong names engraved. I had stared at those extra plaques the way you stare at a missed call from an old friend you never expected to hear from. I tucked one into my tote bag and told no one. It should have ended there. I should have sighed, chalked it up to a mix-up, and gone on icing cupcakes. Instead, I found the side letter. The side letter wasn't addressed to anyone exactly. It had our school's name in the header and the vendor's letterhead at the top and a paragraph about channel partner marketing and brand placement. It explained in plain English that an additional percentage would be added to the invoice to pay a brand partner. In this case, an LLC registered at a suburban townhouse 2 counties over. The signature block was vendor on one side, brand partner on the other. There was no school signature anywhere on it. The handwriting looked familiar. When I swallowed hard, the sound of it felt loud in my ears.
That morning, I had gone to see the vendor in his temporary trailer by the track. He gave me coffee in a paper cup and called me ma'am, the way salesmen say it when they are telling you no without saying no. He pointed to a poster of another field in another state with the same pattern of seams. He showed me a glossy brochure about player safety and a bullet list about impact mitigation. When I asked about the brand partner, he said, "It's just marketing," and tapped a stack of envelopes as if they were trivial. When I said the numbers didn't match, he said I'd have to talk to the booster treasurer. When I said I was the booster treasurer's mother, he ran a hand through his hair and said he'd need to make a call. On my way out, a junior wide receiver held the door for me because our town still raises kids right. He asked me if I was excited about the new field. I told him I was excited about this season and to keep his knees bent when he landed. He grinned and did a little hop to make me smile. Then I got into my car, put my head against the steering wheel, and cried for the first time since my husband died 3 years earlier. It is something to feel the exact moment when you become a problem to people who love you. I felt it when my son said, "Mom, we can't do this right now." He said it in the way grown children say it when they want to stay good people while also stopping a train they see racing toward them. My daughter-in-law didn't say anything then. She didn't have to. Her eyes slid down my blouse over my practical shoes to the envelope I had placed on the table. The look wasn't cruel. It was calculating, and that was worse. I went home to my small house with the maple tree in front and a porch swing that creaks at the second chain link. My porch still smelt like the oil I had rubbed into the wood in April. I put the envelope on the kitchen table where I'd paid bills for 30 years and boiled myself a cup of tea I didn't drink. On the fridge were magnets with photos of my son as a baby in a Halloween pumpkin outfit and photos of him at graduation, all angles and hope. I touched each one, not to be sentimental, but to steady myself. I have known every version of my son, the toddler with skin knees, the middle schooler with a stomachache before a big test, the high school senior with a letter in his hand and pride in his grin. I told the photo on the far right, the one of him biting into a slice of watermelon, "You can be mad at me, but you don't get to take money from kids and call it marketing." As soon as I heard myself say it, I knew I wouldn't be able to step away from the truth, even if stepping toward it meant stepping into a storm. The next day, I went to the equipment shed behind the scoreboard. The lock had been changed. I stood there with my tote bag hanging from my shoulder and watched a man I didn't recognize stack shipping boxes inside. He nodded at me without letting me in. On his shirt was the vendor's logo stitched over his heart. I asked for our equipment manager. He said the manager was at the main building. I asked when that lock had been changed. He said yesterday. I asked if there was a list of who had keys. He smiled the way young men smile when they don't think older women will make trouble and said, "You'd have to ask the partner." "Which partner?" I said. His smile didn't change. "The brand partner." I didn't show him I knew what that meant. On the walk back to the parking lot, the wind blew a nest of yellow caution tape into my legs. I touched the edge of the tape and felt the same sick heat that had rushed through me at the vendor's trailer. The voice in my head that sounds like my husband when he was alive said, "Write it down." So I did. I wrote down the date, time, the initials on the worker's shirt, and the box numbers I could see when he lifted them. When I got into my car, I wrote down the serial number of the new lock because my eyes always go to numbers. I sat there long enough to watch the middle school cross-country team jog past twice. That afternoon, I went to see a woman named Gloria, who had been board chair 5 years ago and who now sold quilts at the craft fair. Gloria looked like the Midwest itself, solid, fair, and never surprised. I told her what I had found. She didn't flare her nostrils or touch her pearls or any of the dramatic things people do in movies. She poured me coffee thick enough to cheer a funeral and said, "Bless your heart for bringing this to me before you blew the roof off on Facebook."
"Is that what I should do?" I asked. "No," she said. "Not if you want to fix the problem instead of lighting a bonfire." She pulled a binder off her bookshelf and slid it across her kitchen table. Booster Club bylaws, last updated 2 years ago. Section 5 covers conflicts of interest. Section 9 covers vendor relationships. Rule 1 of public life, Helen. Read. I read. The words on the page were plain as a crosswalk. Any relationship with a vendor had to be disclosed. Any fee paid to a person with a personal relationship to an officer had to be approved in a public meeting. No officer could vote on a contract where a family member was paid. I tapped my finger on the paragraph and felt that little click in my brain I used to get when my 7th graders finally understood fractions. I thanked Gloria and tucked the binder into my tote. On the porch, she put her hand on my forearm. "If you push this, the people who should have stopped it will get defensive. Don't mistake a flinch for corruption. But don't let a flinch stop you either." "I won't," I said. I met my son at a diner on the side of the highway where the pancakes arrive bigger than your plate and the waitresses call you sweetheart whether you're 6 or 66. He was already there, coffee half drunk, eyes on his phone. I sat down and put sugar packets into an even line because I was too nervous to not organize something. He didn't look up right away. "Mom," he said finally, "you can't bring paperwork to the field. That's not how to do this." "How do we do this?" I asked. "We talk to the treasurer," he said. "You talk to the treasurer at the next meeting." "The treasurer is the brand partner's husband," I said, keeping my voice even. "He didn't disclose that to donors. That's against the bylaws." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "You're right. I know you're right, but this is more complicated than it looks." "It usually is," I said. I waited for him to tell me something that would make me sit back and say, of course I hadn't considered that." He didn't. Instead, when the waitress brought our eggs, he thanked her too brightly, the way you do when you're wearing a mask that starts to itch. "I need you to trust me," he said. "I need you to trust me," I said back. "Trust that I'm not doing this to win. I'm doing it so the kids don't practice on concrete covered in fake grass." He flinched. There it was, the flinch Gloria had warned me about. "Don't say it like that," he said, voice tight. "It isn't concrete, it's state of the art." "Then we will be glad to see the test results," I said, "and we will be glad to see the invoices that match the equipment we actually received." He stared at his eggs and didn't pick up his fork. "Mom, please." My daughter-in-law posted a photo that night.
She was standing on the 50-yard line in a sundress with a caption that read, "Dreams require brave choices and bold partners. So proud of this community and so grateful to be part of bringing real resources to our kids." The comments filled with heart emojis and congratulations, and 3 different people who wrote, "Finally." I watched the hearts bubble up and felt heat rise in my face that had nothing to do with pride. Under the photo, a woman I didn't know asked, "Who is your brand partner?" My daughter-in-law responded with a sparkle emoji and, "We'll announce our partner list soon." I closed my phone and did the dishes by hand with too much soap. The day after the test under the lights, I met a man named Ed behind the maintenance building. Ed had retired from the district 2 years prior, but still came back sometimes to help with the fields because he said it was either that or go crazy in his garage. He had a toolbox and a gnarled hand that could fix anything that wasn't a broken heart. I asked him to run his own turf hardness test with a kit he kept in a canvas bag that smelled like the 70s. He did. He said, "You didn't hear this from me," and he wrote down a number on the back of a popcorn bag. It was higher than it should be. He frowned and shook his head. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means if someone takes a bad fall," he said, "I hope their mama likes hospital coffee." I sat on the curb after he left and watched 2 sparrows argue over a Dorito. I looked at the manila envelope beside me and felt something settle in my bones that felt more like resolve than anger. My resolve has never looked like shouting. It looks like a list with boxes I can check. I made a list. The list had 7 boxes. Box 1, photograph the donor wall and the extra plaques in my closet and make a list of names and amounts. Cross-reference with the donor spreadsheet I could ask for as a member of the Booster Club, and failing that, the donor list printed in the fall program. Box 2, get copies of the invoices and purchase orders, not the summaries, the actual documents. I knew where they would be because purchase orders are creatures of habit. Box 3, find out how the brand partner was added. Ask for the minutes where that happened. If there were no minutes, write down that there were no minutes. Box 4, verify what products we actually got. Shock pads, adhesive, infill, seams. If the invoice said premium and the label on the barrel said basic, take a picture and print it in color. Box 5, meet with the bank to ask about check numbers that didn't appear in the statements we had printed for donors. If the bank won't talk to me, ask donors to ask the bank. Box 6, make sure anyone who could say I was wrong had a chance to say it in a room where a stenographer could hear them. Box 7, try not to lose my son in the process. I checked box 1 that afternoon. I laid the plaques on my living room carpet in the order they appeared on the donor wall. I took pictures with my old camera because I didn't trust the cloud not to become smoke. I made a spreadsheet with names down one side and amounts across the top. I noticed that 4 of the biggest donors had their names spelled correctly on the wall and wrong in the extras. The wrong ones were spelled in a way that matched an early draft of the campaign letter, a draft my daughter-in-law had written before the board asked her to remove her LLC logo from the footer. I realized then that the extra plaques weren't extra at all. They were the first batch. Someone had replaced them later, quietly, without thanking the vendor for the correction publicly. When I closed my eyes that night, I saw the letters of our donors' names float and rearrange.
Box 2 was harder. Purchase orders are catfish. They slide out of your hands if you don't know how to hold them. I wrote an email to the booster treasurer asking for copies of POs and invoices for the turf, the scoreboard, and any consulting fees paid to outside entities. He wrote back that the system was locked for audit and he would circle back after a software update. I waited a day and then asked for the paper copies. He said those had been archived at the school office. I went to the school office and spoke to the new secretary, who was as brave as a daisy in March. She pulled down a box and said, "We don't actually handle booster records, but I found this." Inside were lunch menus, a stack of lost and found notes, and one folder labeled Stadium Phase 1. In that folder were 3 invoices for shipping, 2 for porta potties for the construction crew, and an unsigned purchase order for adhesive, premium. I photocopied the unsigned PO and slid it into my tote. I told the secretary thank you and left her a bag of peaches from my backyard as a bribe to the universe. Box 3 sent me back to Gloria. She dug up the minutes from the last 6 months. We sat with them on her kitchen table and circled every line that mentioned partner. In one meeting, the minute said, "Discussion of strategic partner, no action taken." In the next, "Thanks to partner." In the third, "Partner name withheld pending brand reveal." There it was, plain and infuriating. Gratitude without approval, a reveal without a vote. We looked at each other and didn't say anything for a full minute because sometimes silence is the only thing that respects the weight of a stupid pattern. Box 4 put me face to face with barrels and stickers and the lonely smell of rubber on heat. The equipment shed was still locked, but the vendor had parked 2 pallets by the chain link while men moved things around. I walked over and read every label out loud to commit them to memory. When one of the workers joked, "Lady, you sure like reading," I said, "I like safety," and kept reading. The label said standard bonding agent. The invoice I'd seen said premium adhesive. The difference wasn't a word. It was dollars. And those dollars were someone's scholarship or someone's helmet. My daughter-in-law posted another photo of herself with a caption about small town, big dreams. In the background of the photo, I could see the edge of the barrel and the word standard. When I zoomed in, I could make out the lot number. I printed that photo on my old home printer and circled the number with a pen. I slid the printout into my envelope behind the side letter. Box 5 made my mouth dry. I walked into our local bank with a jar of homemade jam I didn't plan to give anyone. I asked to speak to someone about the booster account. The teller said the treasurer had to be present. I said I had a question about the order of checks. It wasn't a lie. After a long 5 minutes, a manager came out and shook my hand like she'd known me since Sunday school, which she had. She said she couldn't talk to me about balances, but I could request a list of check numbers that had cleared in a given month as a member of the club. I did. She printed something that looked official and useless until I matched it with the fundraiser newsletter on my kitchen table. Check 1049 had paid for banners. Check 1050 had no obvious twin. Check 1051 had paid the halftime band from 2 towns over. Check 1052 had no twin either. 2 ghost checks, 2 gaps that made the pit of my stomach go hollow. I circled them and wrote ask next to each. The ask caused a storm. I got a call that night from the booster president. She is a decent woman whose face can go stern in a way that makes misbehaving boys remember their middle names. She didn't yell. She asked me, nicely, to stop asking around. Not because you're wrong to care, she said, but because you're kicking the anthill and the ants are crawling up everyone's legs. I told her I understood. I told her I couldn't stop, not until we found the truth. She went quiet for a second and then said, "There's talk that you are doing this because you don't like your daughter-in-law." "I don't have to like her to respect the bylaws," I said. "And if the bylaws were ignored," she said, "we will need to fix that carefully." Carefully, I repeated, and had to swallow a laugh because to anyone who had ever watched me tie a ribbon on a gift, carefully was the only word I knew. I woke to a message thread on the neighborhood app saying a small group of parents believed someone in town was sabotaging the field renovation for personal reasons. The thread had photos of my house. I walked out to my porch at 7 a.m. with a mug of coffee and sat there until the sun warmed my shins. A boy on a scooter rattled past like happiness with wheels. When the school bus pulled up at the corner, I watched big kids pretend they were too cool to sprint and then sprint anyway.
The ordinary rhythm of home is the only thing that kept me from crawling out of my own skin. I went inside and wrote an email to the school district's CFO. It said, "I know we are separate entities, but student safety is a district matter. I need to show you something." We met in a room that smelled like dry erase markers. He sat on one side of a conference table with a notebook and a pen that matched his tie. I put the manila envelope on the table and slid out the side letter, the photo of the barrel label from my daughter-in-law's post, and a list of donor plaques with misspellings. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I said, "I want you to have this now, so no one can say later that you didn't know." He read slowly, the way I like people to read most important things. He tapped the letter once with the tip of his pen. "Do the minutes show approval?" he asked. "No," I said. He looked at the photo. "If the product delivered isn't what was billed," he said, "that's a vendor problem." "If the fee was paid to a family member without disclosure," I said, "that's an us problem." "And the turf hardness?" he asked. "Not my jurisdiction," I said, "but I know a man with a kit who got a number we won't be proud to read in the paper."
He closed his notebook. "We will convene a review," he said. "No timelines, no promises, but we will look." He slipped the side letter back into the envelope and slid the envelope back across the table. "Keep your copy," he said. "Bring your copy to the right room when the time comes." The right room came faster than I expected, without any day of the week circled in red. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a hearing with TV cameras. It was a regular school board meeting with agenda items about bus routes and cafeteria tables and a line near the end that read, "Public comment." I put my name on the list. When my name was called, I stood and I carried the envelope to the lectern and I set it down as if it weighed more than paper. My son sat 3 rows back, his jaw tight. My daughter-in-law sat next to him, her hands folded on a purse I knew cost more than I wanted to say out loud. The vendor rep stood in the back with his arms crossed and a polite expression that said this was annoying, but he'd handled worse. I spoke. "I am not here to burn the work of the boosters," I said. "I baked more cookies than any sane person would because I believe in us. I am not here to say no to progress. I like the lights. I like the scoreboard. I like that our kids will play on a field that doesn't turn to mud. I am here because I found paperwork that says we set up a relationship with the brand partner without a vote. I am here because I found invoices that say we paid for one thing and the labels on our barrels say we got another. I am here because the list on the donor wall includes names spelled differently in a way that matches a draft that was later revised. I am here because I watched a test that told me our field is harder than it should be." A murmur went through the room. I handed copies of the side letter to the recorder. I set the printed screenshot with the barrel label next to it. I read the line from the bylaws about family conflict and saw the president's forehead crease in a way that meant she was remembering the night they skipped a disclosure because it felt like a formality. I didn't name my daughter-in-law. I said brand partner. I didn't say kickback. I said fee. I never said Friday or deadline or we have to do this now. I said softly, "Please look at this." The board chair did. He scanned the page, then looked up at the vendor. "Is this your signature?" he asked. "It is," the vendor said. He chose his work carefully. "It's a marketing agreement. It's how we sometimes—" The chair raised a hand. "Was it approved by this board?"
The vendor looked at the booster president in a way that said he hoped she'd talk. She didn't. She looked at her lap. The chair turned to the district CFO. "Do we have a process for reviewing booster contracts linked to student safety?" he asked. "Not formally," the CFO said. "Historically, we've let boosters run their own shop. It might be time to revisit that." From 3 rows back, I could feel my son stare between my shoulder blades. I wanted to turn around and tell him that I love him, that I would drive him to the airport at 3 in the morning and sit with him in the ER and buy him a sandwich, even if I didn't have enough cash for my own. But love is not an excuse to look away from a number that doesn't add up. Our kids were landing on that field with their heads and hope. That fact was heavier than any glare could be. A man stood at the podium after me and said, "My boy is a freshman. He's small. He gets hit like a mailbox sometimes. If that field is hard, I want to know it before he breaks." Another woman said, "I gave $500 and my husband said I was silly." I don't want to be silly. The vendor kept his smile on like a raincoat. My daughter-in-law's lip trembled and then hardened. I kept my eyes on the board chair's hands as he folded them and unfolded them and said, "We will engage third-party review. We will audit the documents. We will suspend use of the field for full contact practice until we have the results." Every word was a door that closed on someone's hope and opened on someone else's relief. Outside in the parking lot, my son caught up to me. "Mom," he said, voice too bright, edged with a plea, "there's a way to do this that doesn't make it personal." "It is personal," I said. "It's our kids." "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's me. It's my wife. It's our reputation." "Then fix it," I said. "Bring every document in a folder with your name on it and show them the truth. If the truth clears you, I will bake an apology into a pie and bring it to your door." He looked at me like I was the one speaking a language he didn't know. Then he looked over my shoulder and said, "She's crying." I turned. My daughter-in-law's mascara had migrated south. She put a hand to her face and said, "How could you do this to us?" There are 1,000 answers to that question that are true, and none of them sound kind when you're standing under a parking lot light. I picked one that was true and as gentle as I could make it. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I did something for them." I nodded toward the field where a boy in a letter jacket was kicking a bottle cap like it was overtime and he was taking the winning shot. The next week was a tangle. The board asked for documents. The boosters called an emergency meeting that wasn't actually an emergency because the bylaws didn't recognize outrage as an emergency. The vendor sent a letter that said he welcomed review and also said we'd see them in court if we defamed them. The parents argued on the neighborhood app about everything except the thing we needed to talk about. I baked because there is only so much adrenaline a 65-year-old body can carry without turning it into sugar. The audit became a stack of narratives. My copy of the story went into a binder with tabs. Invoices, purchase orders, donor correspondence, photos, test results. The booster treasurer's copy came with charts that were beautiful and empty of meaning. The vendor's copy came with pictures of kids smiling on finished fields in other towns and a letter about industry standards. My daughter-in-law's copy came with a video she posted about vision. Her hair with tendrils placed exactly where a camera likes them and a script about feeling attacked by small-minded negativity. I didn't trust any version without numbers I could press with my thumb. Numbers we could press came from a place none of us had considered first, the warehouse at the edge of town where the vendors' trucks had been loaded. An employee there, 22, sweating kindness through a summer of work, emailed the CFO because his older sister had seen the board video online.
He said the lot numbers shipped to our school didn't match the lot numbers on the premium product invoices. He attached a photo taken on a phone with a cracked screen. You could see in the corner of the frame a coffee can full of screws with someone's name written on it in black marker, Benny. The photo mattered because it showed the handwriting on the shipping log that matched the handwriting on our barrel. It wasn't a smoking gun. It was sandals and socks gun. Embarrassing, revealing, not criminal by itself, but not forgotten either. I didn't post about the photo. I brought a printed copy to Gloria and said, "Please hold this for me." She slid it into a folder and said, "You're not safe online. You are safe in print with a witness." I nodded and drank her coffee and felt a little bit like I had carved a notch on a tree in a forest so I could find my way back later. Donors called me at all hours. Mr. Klein, who owns the feed store, apologized for buying me a jar of pickled eggs I don't like, and then asked if his $1,000 had paid for a banner or for someone's purse. A grandmother who moved to town last year whispered that she had given $20 and was afraid it didn't matter. I told her $20 from a soul like hers mattered more than a check with a logo. I told her that every name mattered, spelled right and said with gratitude. I told her we would make it right because this is America and we still know how to fix mistakes when we admit them out loud. My daughter-in-law posted a video with music under it. She stared into the camera and said she was being targeted by a narrative crafted by older forces who feared change. She said sometimes innovative partnerships look wrong to small minds. She said we should be proud to attract brand attention to our little corner of the heartland. Get used to it, she said, with a smile that told me I was supposed to feel small. I clicked the video off and wrote her words on a yellow legal pad and then translated them into what they meant. We took a fee we didn't disclose because we could. If you don't want this to happen again, stop us. The vendor called me the next day. "We can fix this," he said. "Not everything has to be public. We can swap the barrels. We can reprint a letter. You don't want to be the reason your town loses a discount on a replacement schedule." I said, "We deserve the product we paid for." He said, "We're giving you a field." I said, "We're giving you money. That exchange requires honesty." He said, "I have a family." I said, "So do I." He hung up before I could tell him I knew the names of his kids because he'd bragged to me about their spelling bee trophies while I sipped bad coffee in his trailer. I wanted to tell him I wasn't trying to take food off anyone's table. I wanted to tell him I was trying to make sure our kids didn't bleed on a field paid for by a lie. I stood in my kitchen and listened to the refrigerator hum and thought about all the ways people become their worst selves at work. My son stopped answering my calls for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he left a message that said, "Mom, this isn't who we are." I listened to it twice, and then again. I wanted to believe him so badly. It stung in my throat. If it wasn't who we were, we would show numbers. We would set paper on a table and reconcile the accounts while pouring coffee and letting the minutes see daylight. We would call the district and say, "Look." We would take our lumps and do the right thing. I left him a message. "Bring the documents. I'll sit with you." He didn't bring them. The district published a brief note on their website saying that in light of community questions, they had engaged a third-party engineering firm to test the field and would release the report when it was completed. They also asked that all Booster Club financial relationships relevant to the stadium be documented and forwarded for review. It was dry as toast, and it was exactly what we needed. The noise settled a notch. My daughter-in-law posted a photo of a sunset. I baked a chicken. 2 boys played catch in the street and didn't look at either end of the road for trouble. When the third-party report came, it didn't say the field was a death trap. It didn't say the sky was falling. It said the readings were inconsistent and higher than they should be in enough places that the field required remediation. The report used words like re-rolling and reconditioning and adding infield. In a few spots, it said parts might need to be replaced. The company offered to do it for a fee. The vendor said that wasn't necessary. The district said they would not accept the field condition until the report's findings were addressed. The boosters said nothing at all.
The brand partner resigned. My daughter-in-law posted a photo of a coffee cup and said something about self-care. The booster treasurer, my son, resigned too, with a statement that said he was proud of his work and didn't want to be a distraction. I read the sentence 4 times and tried to feel compassion before anything else. He is my boy. He has my husband's shoulders and my mother's stubbornness. He is the sum of everything we taught him and everything the world taught him after. I dialed his number. He answered. "Mom," he said, voice small for a man whose job is to keep boys from breaking. I didn't know how to stop it once it started. "We're all still stopping it," I said. "That's the point." "It wasn't supposed to go this way," he said. "It never is," I said. He inhaled and exhaled. I could hear my granddaughter in the background saying something about her stuffed turtle. I closed my eyes and pictured the kitchen table at his house, the fruit ball, the stack of mail, the shoes by the door. "I'm sorry," he said abruptly. He said it the way some men say "I love you," quickly before it flickers out. "I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. I'm sorry I chose easy wrong instead of hard right." I put my hand flat on my table as if I could smooth out the tremor in my own chest. "Thank you," I said. "Now help fix it." We met, not at the stadium and not in a room with microphones. We met at the elementary school library with picture books leaning on stands and a poster about kindness above the window. He brought 3 folders. I brought my binder. He opened his folders one by one and laid out what he had: the invoices, the deposit slips, the checks with numbers that had looked like ghosts from the bank's printout. They weren't ghosts. They were checks written to the brand partners LLC for strategic marketing and activation. The memos were blank. He kept his eyes on the table as he turned each page like it might snag and tear. It didn't. Paper is patient. Paper will let you lay your shame on it without tearing. I took photos with my old camera. He didn't tell me not to.
"Did you sign the side letter?" I asked. "No," he said. "She did." "Did the board vote?" I asked. "No," he said. "We told them we were exploring options. We told them we'd announce later." "Did you know the barrels were standard?" I asked. "I suspected," he said. "I didn't ask." "Do you know why I kept asking?" I said. He sort of smiled, a sad little move of his face that reminded me of when he was 13 and didn't make the team his first try. "Because you know that rot spreads," he said. "And because I love you," I said. He took a breath like he was stepping into cold water and nodded. "I know," he said. The board met again. The vendor brought a lawyer. My daughter-in-law did not come. The boosters sat in a practiced row and whispered to each other with the careful air of people who want to be anywhere else. The district CFO gave a summary without adjectives. The board chair said that any payments made without approval and not tied to actual deliverables would need to be returned to the club or credited to the project. He said that the district would supervise any further expenditures associated with the field. He said that the field remediation would be completed before full practice resumed. He said the brand partner agreement was void because it had never been properly approved. He said, "We intend to fix this with integrity." It was a speech without drama, and it made me want to grab his hand and squeeze it.
At home that night, I took the side letter out of the envelope and held it over the sink. I didn't burn it. I put it back in the envelope, and then I put the envelope under a stack of cookbooks and an atlas. Because sometimes the best thing you can do after you tell the truth is put a map over it and imagine a vacation. The field got better. Men came with machines that rolled and brushed and poured. The vendor did not smile as much. My son joined the cleanup crew and lifted bags in the August heat. He lost 7 pounds and his temper twice, and his fear a little bit. My daughter-in-law posted less for a while. When she posted again, it was a photo of her and my granddaughter eating popsicles. I liked it and felt silly for liking it, and then liked it again. People are allowed to be more than their worst choice. I am allowed to protect kids and still want my granddaughter to be happy eating something sticky. The donor wall changed. The names were spelled correctly now. The extras stayed in my closet until the board said they would auction them for scholarships, as a reminder that we can turn mistakes into something useful. I didn't love the symbolism. I didn't fight it. Picking every battle is a fool's work. I picked the ones with numbers attached, and I slept. One afternoon in September, I stood on the sideline as the training staff showed me the new testing kit they had purchased with a discount from a company that had read the news and offered help. The numbers were better. The trainer smiled at me and said, "Thank you for being a pain." I said, "You're welcome." He laughed and went to adjust a pad on a player's shoulder. A woman I barely knew came up to me with a bag of apples from her tree. She said, "I didn't like you very much last month." I nodded. "I know," I said. "I didn't like me very much sometimes either." She handed me the apples and said, "I like you now." I said, "I'll make a pie." We played under lights with a field that felt like cushion and possibility instead of a dare. The band nailed a tricky formation at halftime. A freshman caught a ball with hands that will grow into a man someday. A senior put his arm around him in the sideline in the way seniors should. The scoreboard worked. It wasn't magic. It was what happens when we add right numbers to hard work. On a Sunday, I drove out of town on a 2-lane road flanked by corn and sky. I pulled over at a county line to look at a field exactly like ours in the distance, green and glittering. I imagined a Helen in that town, hands on a kitchen table, envelope under the salt shaker, wondering if she had it in her to be the person people resent before they thank. I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted to tell her it's going to make your stomach hurt and your friends whisper, and then the air will clear and your grandson will run without fear. I wanted to tell her you don't win anything except the right to sleep. I wanted to tell her that's worth a lot. My son came over for dinner a week later with my granddaughter in a dress with stars on it and a stuffed turtle under her arm. He hugged me too long for a man who thinks he's supposed to hug short. We ate roast chicken and green beans and a pie made from a bag of apples from a woman who had disliked me. After we put the dishes in the sink, he stood at the counter and said, "Mom, if I had brought you the invoices months ago, would you have yelled?" "No," I said. "I would have started a pot of coffee." He nodded like that made him want to weep. He said, "I want to be the kind of man who brings the invoices first next time." "Then be him," I said. "It's a choice you can make again every morning." He rubbed his neck.
"She's mad at you," he said. "She can be. I can be a lot of things." "She said you hate her," he said. "I do not hate her," I said. "I hate choices she made that hurt kids. I would give her the last piece of pie if she walked through that door right now." He looked at the pie. He looked at the door. "She might," he said. She didn't, not that night. But a month later, she called me. Her voice was smaller than it was on camera and bigger than I had ever heard it on the phone. She said, "I thought the feat was smart." I said, "It was clever." She said, "I thought everyone did it." I said, "Everyone didn't tell our board." She said, "I thought it would make me look important." I said, "You already are important to my granddaughter." She cried without trying to make it pretty. I let her. We built a little better after that. We added a line to the booster bylaws that required any agreement with anyone's cousin to be read out loud into the minutes, while someone not related to anyone wrote it down. We put a paragraph on the donor page about what donors can expect. We put the test numbers on the scoreboard at the beginning of the season with a note that said, "This is what safety looks like." We put my phone number on a sign that said, "Ask for the receipts." I did not become famous. I became unpopular in some circles and beloved in others, and mostly I went back to bringing watermelon slices to practice because teenage boys still don't eat enough fruit. I didn't get a plaque. I don't want one. This isn't a story about medals. It's a story about a woman with a binder who remembered that every dollar is an act of trust, and every field should feel like forgiveness, not risk. It's a story about a son who resigned, then lifted boxes in the heat until he became a man who could sit in a library and turn pages while telling his mother the truth. It's a story about a town that wanted to be modern and learned that modern can mean transparent instead of flashy. It's a story about a little girl with a stuffed turtle who told me at bedtime that she would play soccer someday on the soft grass and not fall down. I told her she could fall a little because falling a little teaches you where your knees are. She said, "Does it hurt?" I said, "Sometimes." She said, "Then we get up?" I said, "Yes, honey." Then we get up. Months later, when the leaves turned and the band had new songs and the air tasted like smoke from someone's weekend bonfire, the vendor sent a check. It wasn't as big as the partner fees had been, but it was enough to fix what the report said needed fixing and to buy 3 extra helmets and to fund a scholarship in the name of a boy who loved this field so much it could have been his backyard. The letter with the check said nothing that mattered. The check mattered. I tucked a copy of it into my binder behind the side letter. I put the binder on the top shelf of my hall closet between the extra batteries and the clean towels I save for company. I hope I never have to take it down again. I hope future meetings are about music stands and new pom-poms and the simple happiness of cold water on a hot night. I hope the town forgives me for the days I made them wince. I forgive them for not wanting to look at numbers when the lights are so pretty. I drive past the stadium in the early morning sometimes when the fog sits low and the goalposts look like they're holding up the sky. In that soft light, it's easy to forget any of this ever happened. It's easy to believe the field was always this safe. It's easy to think progress just happens. Then I think about the envelope and the barrel label in the corner of a photo that wasn't supposed to show anything, and the little click in my brain when the bylaws line met the silence in the minutes. I think about a chair tapping a pen and a man with a gnarled hand dropping a silver ball onto a field that hummed too hard. I think about my son carrying bags in the heat. I think about my daughter-in-law holding her child on a Tuesday afternoon in a messy kitchen without a camera in the room. I think about apples and forgiveness and the steady glide of a pen signing a check that makes a wrong into a lesson.
The first time we used the field after the remediation was complete, the trainer showed me the meter one more time. He dropped the silver ball, it bounced and came to rest, and the handheld chirped a number that made us both nod the way people nod when they feel gratitude like a warm coat. "There," he said. "That's how it's supposed to be."
I do not hate her, I said. I hate choices she made that hurt kids. I would give her the last piece of pie if she walked through that door right now. He looked at the pie. He looked at the door. "She might," he said. She didn't, not that night. But a month later, she called me. Her voice was smaller than it was on camera and bigger than I had ever heard it on the phone. She said, "I thought the feat was smart." I said, "It was clever." She said, "I thought everyone did it." I said, "Everyone didn't tell our board." She said, "I thought it would make me look important." I said, "You already are important to my granddaughter." She cried without trying to make it pretty. I let her. We built a little better after that. We added a line to the booster bylaws that required any agreement with anyone's cousin to be read out loud into the minutes, while someone not related to anyone wrote it down. We put a paragraph on the donor page about what donors can expect. We put the test numbers on the scoreboard at the beginning of the season with a note that said, "This is what safety looks like." We put my phone number on a sign that said, "Ask for the receipts." I did not become famous. I became unpopular in some circles and beloved in others, and mostly I went back to bringing watermelon slices to practice because teenage boys still don't eat enough fruit. I didn't get a plaque. I don't want one. This isn't a story about medals. It's a story about a woman with a binder who remembered that every dollar is an act of trust, and every field should feel like forgiveness, not risk. It's a story about a son who resigned, then lifted boxes in the heat until he became a man who could sit in a library and turn pages while telling his mother the truth. It's a story about a town that wanted to be modern and learned that modern can mean transparent instead of flashy. It's a story about a little girl with a stuffed turtle who told me at bedtime that she would play soccer someday on the soft grass and not fall down. I told her she could fall a little because falling a little teaches you where your knees are. She said, "Does it hurt?" I said, "Sometimes." She said, "Then we get up?" I said, "Yes, honey." Then we get up. Months later, when the leaves turned and the band had new songs and the air tasted like smoke from someone's weekend bonfire, the vendor sent a check. It wasn't as big as the partner fees had been, but it was enough to fix what the report said needed fixing and to buy 3 extra helmets and to fund a scholarship in the name of a boy who loved this field so much it could have been his backyard. The letter with the check said nothing that mattered. The check mattered. I tucked a copy of it into my binder behind the side letter. I put the binder on the top shelf of my hall closet between the extra batteries and the clean towels I save for company. I hope I never have to take it down again. I hope future meetings are about music stands and new pom-poms and the simple happiness of cold water on a hot night. I hope the town forgives me for the days I made them wince. I forgive them for not wanting to look at numbers when the lights are so pretty. I drive past the stadium in the early morning sometimes when the fog sits low and the goalposts look like they're holding up the sky. In that soft light, it's easy to forget any of this ever happened. It's easy to believe the field was always this safe. It's easy to think progress just happens. Then I think about the envelope and the barrel label in the corner of a photo that wasn't supposed to show anything, and the little click in my brain when the bylaws line met the silence in the minutes. I think about a chair tapping a pen and a man with a gnarled hand dropping a silver ball onto a field that hummed too hard. I think about my son carrying bags in the heat.
I think about my daughter-in-law holding her child on a Tuesday afternoon in a messy kitchen without a camera in the room. I think about apples and forgiveness and the steady glide of a pen signing a check that makes a wrong into a lesson. The first time we used the field after the remediation was complete, the trainer showed me the meter one more time. He dropped the silver ball, it bounced and came to rest, and the handheld chirped a number that made us both nod the way people nod when they feel gratitude like a warm coat. "There," he said. "That's how it's supposed to be."
"That's how honesty feels," I said. He laughed and said I was a poet for a woman who loves spreadsheets. Maybe I am. Maybe my poetry lives in columns that line up and in the quiet courage of paperwork. Maybe my protests will always sound like, "Please show me." That's fine. We need all kinds in this country. We need people whose power is in a voice and a camera and a platform. We need people whose power is in a binder and a gentle hand on a table and the patience to listen to a room breathe while truth makes itself known. I put my hand on the rail of the bleachers again the same way I had that first night and felt the metal cool and solid under my palm. The lights hummed, the band tuned, the boys shouted each other's names in voices that would someday be a little lower and a little sadder and somehow still joyful when they come home for Thanksgiving and stand on this field to remember. I thought about the message I wanted them to carry long after this season ended, after the gear was sold and the polos faded and the scoreboard needed a new bulb. I wanted them to know that adults loved them enough to count properly. I wanted them to know that money can be a kind of love if we handle it clean. I wanted them to know that it is not treason to say, "Show me." It is stewardship. When I got home after that game, I wrote a note on a plain card with a pen I saved for important words. I wrote, "Ask for receipts, ask for tests, ask for minutes. Do it kindly, do it anyway." I tucked the card into the front pocket of the binder because I thought maybe someday someone might open it and need to see it before they saw the letters and the numbers and the maps. Maybe they would need courage in handwriting before they needed courage in math. The next morning, my granddaughter sat at my kitchen table with crayons and drew the field. She drew the green bright and the lines crisp and the scoreboard taller than the trees. She drew little figures with circles for heads and sticks for legs and lines where their smiles are. She drew me in the stands as a rectangle with glasses and a heart next to me, and a tiny square she said was my envelope. "What's in the square?" I asked. "Proof," she said, proud as anything, and then she shrugged because she is 6 and it was time to go find a snail in the garden. I taped her drawing to my fridge next to the photo of my son with watermelon on his chin. I stood back and looked at the two of them side by side and thought about time. Somewhere between those two pictures with everything that matters, everything we keep, everything we can't, everything we fix, everything we break and then mend. Somewhere between those pictures is the steady, stubborn, ordinary bravery it takes to run a small American town without letting anyone run off with our hope. I took down the atlas from the top of the binder and opened it to our state. I traced the thin road from our town to the nearest city, and then farther to where the company who printed that side letter keeps their printers, and farther to where the turf is made, and farther to where the money moves in wire diagrams above our heads we'll never see. The map looks like veins. I imagined a heart in the center of all of it, beating not because anyone demanded it on a schedule, but because that is what hearts do. Then I closed the book, put it back on top of the binder, and cut 2 slices of pie. one for me, one wrapped in foil in case someone I love knocks on my door, angry and tired and ready to talk.